My husband said I was too old and no longer interested in him, so I lost 30 kilograms, changed beyond recognition, and left him for his best friend, who had always dreamed of me. My husband remained alone for the rest of his life. Stay with us until the very end to find out how the story ends. We look forward to your comments and thoughts on the story. Tom and I were together for almost 20 years. 20 years filled with memories, plans, and everyday worries. At first, everything seemed so simple and bright. We met, fell in love, and got married. I remember how he looked at me that first evening, as if I were the most precious person in the world. It seemed to me that nothing in the world could hurt me as long as he was near me. Over the years, life changed us. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, everything changed. Work, children, worries, illnesses. We began to talk less and look into each other's eyes less often. I tried to stay attractive, took care of myself, but my strength was fading, and fatigue sometimes filled my soul to the brim. One evening, as we were sitting at dinner, he said for the first time what he had been keeping inside. I wasn't expecting it, and wasn't ready for it. "You're too old for me," he said, as if he were talking about the weather or the day of the week. The words were short, but they sounded like thunder, shattering the familiar peace. I felt everything inside me tighten. I will never forget that evening. He didn't say it reproachfully. He wasn't angry. He simply stated a fact, as if it were a decision that couldn't be changed. At that moment, the world around me seemed to stop. I looked at him, at this man with whom I had shared my life, and felt that we were no longer together, that the Tom I knew was gone, and all that was left was a stranger who didn't see me. I could have given up and let the pain and hurt consume me, but I didn't. Another me woke up inside, a woman who wasn't going to give up. I realized that if he had stopped seeing me, if I had become too old in his eyes, then I needed to get myself back. For myself, first and foremost, that was the beginning of my journey, a journey of change, struggle, and discovery, a journey on which I learned to love myself again and not be afraid to be happy. After that evening, I couldn't sleep for a long time. Tom's words flashed through my mind, and each one sounded like a sentence. "You're too old." It's not just a phrase, it's a breakup, a break between who I was to him before and who I am now. It seemed that my whole life, all the years we spent together, were meaningless. But in the morning, I woke up a different person. A woman who decided not to let other people's opinions destroy her. I knew it was time to take action. It was time to regain not only my appearance, but also my inner strength. It was time to stop hiding behind fatigue, behind the words, "It's too late anyway," behind the fear of being alone. I started small. I changed my diet and started exercising more, walking, yoga. With each passing day, I felt my strength returning. In the evenings, I put on music and danced in front of the mirror. I smiled at myself. Then I joined a gym. It was hard. My muscles ached, I was out of breath, and young women with seemingly unattainable energy flitted by. But I kept going. For me, it wasn't just sport. It was a fight for myself. My wardrobe began to change too. I stopped hiding in dark hoodies. I bought some bright dresses and fashionable clothes. I started wearing jewelry again and doing my makeup neatly. The woman I saw in the mirror was someone I hadn't seen in a long time, confident, vibrant, alive. Most importantly, I stopped waiting for someone else's approval. I started living for myself. And when a few months later I met Jake, Tom's best friend, I felt like I could start a new chapter in my life. Meeting Jake was unexpected, but it felt like fate. We met at a party that I finally decided to go to. Before, events like that seemed foreign and scary to me, but now I was craving new experiences, connection, and warmth. Jake immediately caught my attention with his kindness and attention. He wasn't just a friend of my ex-husband. He had always been there for me, but now I saw something more in him, something real and sincere. We talked for a long time about life, about dreams, about what we had lost and what we could still find. With each new conversation, I felt hope blossoming inside me. Hope that love could come not only in youth, but also when it seems that everything is already behind you. Jake listened to me, supported me, and inspired me to be myself, without masks or compromises. We started spending more and more time together, going for walks to cafes, spending quiet evenings together. He was there when I needed support, and together we laughed as we reminisced about funny stories from the past. At first, I was afraid of how Tom would react when he found out, but the fear gradually receded, giving way to inner peace and confidence that now I was making my own choices. With Jake, I felt that I could be loved and desired despite everything that had happened before. It was my new life, bright, full of hope, and new discoveries. When Tom found out about my relationship with Jake, his reaction was unexpected. I didn't expect anger or open confrontation. Rather, it was something cold and distant. In his eyes, I saw not so much jealousy as regret. Regret that he had lost not only me, but also the life we could have built together. We ran into each other by chance at a cafe where I often went with Jake. Tom approached me, and for a moment there was silence between us, filled with everything that had been left unsaid. He looked at me and said, "You've changed." "I don't recognize you." I smiled, not hiding my confidence. "Yes, I've changed. For myself, to be happy." He nodded and walked away. I realized that the past was in the past. My new relationship was my life, and I had the right to choose happiness. Jake and I continued to build our future, free from resentment and pain. He became not just a lover to me, but a true friend, partner, and support. Tom was left alone, and I knew that was the price he paid for his loss. The new life I started with Jake seemed completely different from what I had before. It was like coming out of a long winter into the sun. At first, my eyes squinted from the brightness, my heart beat faster, and the air seemed especially fresh. But with that came the realization that change is not always easy, and the path to happiness is sometimes thorny. Jake was a man of rare emotional depth. He listened to me not only with words, but also with his silence. Sometimes I was afraid to open up. After all, resentment and fear had lived in my heart for so many years. But he didn't rush me. He didn't demand anything. He was just there, reminding me that love is a space for understanding and patience. We went for lots of walks, in parks, along city streets, sometimes just sitting on benches watching people go by. He told me stories from his past, about his hopes and failures. I shared my dreams with him, dreams that had been gathering dust on the shelves of oblivion for so long. With him, I began to believe in myself again. Gradually, I noticed how not only my soul was changing, but my body as well. I began to feel desirable and beautiful again. Not because I met some standard, but because a light had been lit inside me. A light of confidence and self-love. I stopped hiding in the shadows, in dark colors and baggy clothes. Now I chose bright outfits, bold hairstyles, and laughed loudly and sincerely. Of course, there were moments of doubt. Sometimes I remembered Tom, his words, and his cold gaze. But instead of feeling pain, I tried to understand that this was not my story now. It was his choice. And I let go of the past in order to move forward. Jake didn't just become my support. He became my inspiration. Together we made plans, trips, new hobbies, little everyday joys. We supported each other in moments of fatigue and doubt, shared our dreams and fears. He reminded me that age is just a number and that true youth lives in the soul. With each passing day, I became happier, and this joy was reflected in my every move. I realized that true love doesn't grow old or go away. It comes when you're ready to accept it. With each passing day, my new life with Jake became brighter and fuller. But at the same time, I realized that letting go of the past completely was not easy. Tom, my ex-husband, was still part of my history, part of the years I had spent with him. And despite the pain and disappointment, deep down I respected what we had had. Our relationship with Tom had changed. We weren't enemies, but we weren't friends either. Time had severed the thin thread that bound us together, leaving only memories and lessons. We rarely crossed paths, but when we did, the atmosphere was calm, without irritation or recriminations. In his eyes, I saw a longing for what was lost, but without malice, and in mine, determination and confidence in my own choice. I learned to rebuild my life without looking back or feeling afraid. Together with Jake, we created our own cozy world. We chose furniture, threw parties for friends, planned trips, and simply enjoyed the simple pleasures of life. A cup of coffee on the balcony, walks at sunset, reading books. Sometimes I caught myself thinking that I had never felt so alive and free. I stopped being afraid of age stereotypes and society's expectations. Now I understood that my value was not in how others saw me, but in how I accepted myself. Tom was left alone. It was his decision and his choice, and I felt neither anger nor regret towards him. I was grateful for the lessons and for the fact that they had led me here, to new love, new happiness, a new me. A whole life lay ahead, full of possibilities, discoveries, and love, and I was ready to embrace it in all its strength and beauty. The beginning of my new life with Jake was both exciting and difficult. We were both people with experience, habits, and wounds, and we had to not only love each other, but also learn to understand, accept, and support each other. We spent a lot of time together during the first few weeks, discussing plans and sharing our experiences and fears. Jake was patient and attentive. He didn't rush me and respected my space and pace of change. It felt like I was learning to trust and open up again. There were moments of doubt. Sometimes old habits and inner fears took over. I was afraid that I might not live up to expectations, that my age or past would become an obstacle. But Jake always knew how to support me and remind me that I am worthy of happiness and love just the way I am. We discovered new hobbies together. We went on scenic walks, attended cooking classes, and even signed up for dance classes. These weren't just activities, but steps toward getting closer and creating new memories built on mutual respect and joy. I got to know Jake's friends gradually. They welcomed me with open hearts, supported me, and were always ready to help. It was important to feel part of a new circle, a new family. By this time, my relationship with my ex-husband had finally become neutral. We remained polite and tactful, avoiding conflict. He saw that I was happy, and perhaps that brought him some peace. I realized more and more that age is not a barrier, but an experience that allows you to appreciate every moment. Together with Jake, I discovered a new me, free, bold, and authentic. With each passing day, I felt more and more that I was changing not only on the outside, but also on the inside. I used to be afraid of strangers' glances, whispers behind my back, and judgment for my age and for changing. I felt like society had put me in a box. A woman my age should be quiet, inconspicuous, and give way to younger women. But I knew that wasn't me. With Jake by my side, I learned to love myself for who I am. I learned to go out into the world with confidence, to be bright and confident. For the first time in many years, I felt the desire to dress nicely, wear bright colors, and walk with my head held high. We walked through the streets of the city, and I noticed how passers-by paid attention to me. I used to be afraid of those looks, but now I smiled back, feeling a surge of strength. It seemed to me that I had finally become the master of my own life. There were difficult moments. Sometimes old doubts crept in, making me compare myself to those who were younger, slimmer, more successful. But I learned to stop and say to myself, "You are unique, and this is your time." Jake always supported me, reminding me that true beauty comes from within. We went to concerts, theaters, and new restaurants together. I rediscovered the joy of life in every laugh, every glance, every touch. This freedom was a real gift to me. I stopped hiding in the shadows of the past. I started writing a new chapter, a chapter about a woman who is not afraid to be herself and who deserves love at any age. As I immersed myself in my new life, my relationships with my friends and family also began to change. Many of them looked at me with surprise at first, and sometimes with disbelief. In their eyes, I was still the woman they knew before, quiet, shy, living in the shadows, but the changes couldn't go unnoticed. One day my best friend, whom I hadn't seen in a long time, noticed my new confidence and said, "You've blossomed again. It's amazing and inspiring." That was important. I realized that I was changing my life not only for myself, but also for those around me. My family started asking me what had happened to me, where this energy had come from. I told them honestly that it was the result of a struggle with myself, a desire to be happy and loved. Some relatives reacted differently. My sister was reserved in her support, but deep down, she probably had her doubts. My daughter was happy to see me the way I had become. She said she was proud of me and wanted me to be happy. My friends were skeptical about my new relationship with Jake at first, but after getting to know him better, they realized that this was not just a passing infatuation. We started seeing them often, having dinner and going for walks together. The atmosphere was warm and heartfelt. In the end, I realized that change is not only an internal process, but also an external reflection that affects those around you. I am grateful to everyone who supported me and did not distance themselves when I became a different person. My life gradually turned into a beautiful, bright story filled with love, respect, and true joy. Everything was wonderful. A new relationship, a new lifestyle, a new me. But life is rarely without challenges. Jake and I had barely had time to feel truly together when we encountered our first serious difficulties. At first, these were minor misunderstandings, different views on everyday life, habits, and time spent together. We were both adults with established views, and sometimes it seemed difficult to adjust to each other. But soon more serious issues arose. Despite all his love and care, Jake sometimes reminded me of Tom, my ex-husband, in his words and actions. I caught myself comparing them, and it prevented me from being completely open. We talked about it. Jake was honest. He understood that he didn't want to be a shadow of the past and was willing to change for our future. I opened up too. I told him about my fears and insecurities. The first difficulties became a test that we passed together. We learned to listen to each other, to give in, to seek compromises. This brought us closer and made our relationship stronger. These trials taught me that true love is not only joy and happiness, but also work, patience, and mutual respect. There are no universal recipes for happiness in life, but I gradually learned to create it myself, from simple moments, from love for myself and for those around me. The changes that began with letting go of pain and resentment continued in small daily victories. I learned to accept myself, with all the changes that come with age, with all the fears that once seemed insurmountable. I used to think that youth was a woman's only asset, but now I understand that true strength comes from experience and confidence. Every morning, I thanked myself for choosing to move forward, for the strength that allowed me to change. Jake and I created a cozy home and learned to listen to each other without rushing or judging. Walks became an important part of this journey. Long conversations under the stars, stories about childhood, plans for the future. I discovered new sides of myself and my partner, and it brought us closer together. I stopped comparing myself to others. I realized that happiness is not a competition, but an inner state. And in this state, I found harmony. Every day was now a small celebration for me, filled with meaning and warmth. When I started to change and build a new life, the reaction of those around me was immediate. For some, it was a surprise. For others, it was a topic of conversation and even condemnation. But I was already a different person, a confident, strong woman who was not afraid to be herself. My family was initially reserved about my changes. My daughter supported me, but sometimes I heard her doubts. "You're changing too fast." I understood her. After all, everything was happening so quickly. We talked a lot and explained our feelings to each other. In the end, our relationship only grew stronger. My friends were puzzled at first. Some joked, "Are you in love again? At our age?" But then they saw how I was glowing, how open I was to the world, and they changed along with me. Some women started asking for advice, asking me to share my secret on how to stay happy in middle age. My colleagues at work were surprised at first, but then they respected me for my strength and determination. My success in my personal life inspired them and made them think about their own relationships. But there were also those who were jealous or simply didn't understand. Sometimes I heard snide remarks, even hurtful comments. However, I learned to ignore them. My life is my choice. My joy is my strength. Jake and I went to meet friends, threw small parties, and discovered new places in the city. He supported me in everything, and that gave me the strength to keep going. The changes in my life were inspiring and gave me hope. I became an example that it's never too late to be happy. Over time, our relationship with Jake grew deeper and more serious. We started making plans for the future that I had never even dared to dream of before. These plans weren't just words. They became the foundation of my new life, the foundation on which I wanted to build everything that had previously seemed unattainable. We talked about trips we hadn't allowed ourselves to take before, either because of work or because we were tired. I dreamed of seeing the ocean, feeling the fresh sea breeze on my face, walking along the shore where I had never been before. Jake also wanted to discover new cities, learn about different cultures, and try unusual foods. We started collecting books and guidebooks, planning routes, and dreaming about every step. In addition to traveling, we discussed how to decorate our home. Jake suggested that we renovate it together to create a cozy space that would reflect our life together and our new outlook. We chose colors, furniture, and decor, creating each element with love and attention to detail. It was our little project that brought us even closer together. In addition, I started spending time on my hobbies again. When I was younger, I loved to paint, but I gave it up for many years. Now, inspired by the changes and Jake's support, I picked up my brushes again. Painting became a way for me to express my feelings and explore myself. Jake became my first viewer and my most sincere fan. His support inspired me to pursue new creative endeavors. We weren't afraid to dream and make plans that had previously seemed impossible. It was true freedom, freedom of choice and joy. Together, we experienced not only joy, but also difficulties. Sometimes fears returned, sometimes doubts arose. But now I had someone who would not let go of my hand and would walk beside me, ready to support me at any moment. I realized that happiness is not just big events, but thousands of small moments filled with meaning and love. And it was this new outlook on life that gave me the strength to move forward and not look back. As I embarked on a new life, I couldn't help but notice how not only my inner world was changing, but also my external environment. Every day brought new challenges, many of them related to public opinion. That invisible but palpable pressure that seems to hang in the air, dictating rules, especially for women my age. I found that many people around me looked at me with surprise and sometimes even condemnation. Some friends and acquaintances whispered behind my back, some tried to give me advice, as if I had lost my way or was doing something wrong. Phrases like, "At your age, that's not acceptable," or "You shouldn't stand out so much," were heard more often than I would have liked. Sometimes these words hurt, reminding me of the stereotypes that are so deeply ingrained in society. But it was in those moments that I remembered everything I had been through. I remembered the words of my grandmother, who taught me to be honest with myself and never be afraid to be who I am. I knew that happiness is not about the number of years you live, but the quality of your life, and if I feel joy and harmony, then I am on the right path. My inner fears did not disappear instantly either. Sometimes insecurity returned. Will I be able to withstand this pressure? How will my children and family react? But Jake was always there, the one who believed in me, who reminded me that true strength lies in love and acceptance. My loved ones also gradually got used to my changes. My daughter became my biggest supporter. She saw me blossom and was proud of me. Other relatives were wary at first, but over time they began to accept and respect my choice. We opened new pages of communication based on sincerity and mutual respect. Over time, I realized that change is a process that takes time and patience, both for myself and for those around me. I learned not to be afraid of being different, not to be afraid to go against outdated norms and expectations. Life became brighter and more fulfilling. I stopped being afraid of other people's opinions and started listening only to my heart. Together with Jake, we built a future that we chose for ourselves, free and happy. The first holidays I spent with Jake were a real test for me, but also a huge joy. Each evening was filled with a special atmosphere, warmth, laughter, and the feeling that I had finally found my place in the world, which I had been searching for so long. We decided to invite close friends and a few relatives to our newly renovated home. I spent a long time preparing, choosing the menu and decorations, and thinking through every detail to create a celebration that we would all remember for a long time. For me, it was more than just an evening. It was a demonstration that my life had changed, and I was proud of it. As the guests began to arrive, I noticed some surprised looks directed at me. Several women who had barely noticed me before were now trying to strike up conversations, smile, and show interest. I understood what was behind their amazement, but I was pleased. I saw that the changes in my life had not gone unnoticed. Jake was magnificent, friendly, attentive, with a slight smile on his face. He skillfully kept the conversation going, told funny stories, and made the guests feel comfortable. It seemed to me that this evening was the beginning of something new, not only for us, but for everyone around us. Memories of the past came up in conversation, of how I used to be and how I had become. Some shared their stories of change and struggle, and I realized that we are all looking for happiness, sometimes going through difficulties. That evening gave me the confidence that I am not alone, that there are people who are willing to support and accept me for who I am. I felt the barriers between me and the world disappear. The party ended well after midnight, but I couldn't sleep for a long time, thinking about everything that had happened. I was grateful to fate for Jake, for my new home, for the new life we were building together, and in my heart, I hoped that many more happy moments awaited us. Our relationship with Jake grew stronger every day, but with it came new challenges that required patience, mutual understanding, and a willingness to change. We both understood that true love is not only happiness, but also work and responsibility. One of the first challenges was finding a balance between our habits and lifestyles. I was used to a measured pace, while Jake had a more active lifestyle. Sometimes our plans didn't match, which led to misunderstandings, but we learned to compromise, listen, and hear each other. There were also external challenges. Some friends and relatives continued to doubt the sincerity of our relationship, sometimes making unfriendly remarks. It wasn't easy, but we decided to ignore it and build our life based on trust and love. We started playing sports together, which brought us even closer. I discovered new activities, which gave me strength and confidence. Jake was always there to support and inspire me. Together, we planned trips and dreamed of a house by the sea where we could spend time in peace and harmony. These dreams strengthened us and gave meaning to each day. In addition, we began to spend more time with family and friends who accepted us for who we were. This created a sense of true community and support. I felt that our story was not just love, but a real partnership built on respect, understanding, and mutual support. Every new day, I thanked fate for this second chance to be happy and loved. Accepting yourself for who you really are is a long and difficult process, especially when life presents lessons that force you to look inside yourself with new honesty. For me, it was a journey where I learned not just to accept my age and past mistakes, but to accept every part of myself with love and respect. I used to blame myself for wasting time, for letting fear and doubt control my actions. I thought that as I got older, I would become less important, less attractive, and that the world around me would become cold and alien. But now, thanks to Jake's support and my own efforts, I have started to see myself differently. Every morning, I took time to think about the uniqueness that lives within me, which neither youth nor outward appearance can give. I learned to listen to my body and understand its signals, to care for it with tenderness and patience. My sports and creative activities became not just hobbies, but a source of joy and energy. Sometimes I would sit down with a notebook and write down my thoughts, dreams, and fears, breaking them down into pieces and freeing myself from the weight of the past. This helped me understand that all my experiences were part of the long journey that had made me who I am. Jake and I often talked about how important it is to be honest with each other and with ourselves. He helped me discover new sides of my personality, supported my initiatives, and encouraged my desire for growth. An atmosphere of calm and confidence began to surround me. I stopped being afraid of appearing weak or imperfect. Instead, I began to accept myself completely, with my strengths and weaknesses, my joys and sorrows. This inner acceptance was reflected in the outside world. I looked people in the eye with confidence and walked down the street feeling harmony between my mind and body. Every new day became a gift, an opportunity to be myself and live life to the fullest. Having found inner harmony and accepted myself completely, I felt ready to move forward, to realize the dreams and plans that once seemed unattainable. Together with Jake, we began to build our future, not in the shadow of the past, but in the bright light of the present. The first step was to plan our long-awaited trip. We chose a place where we could not only relax, but also be inspired by new experiences and discover something unusual and meaningful. In the end, we chose Italy, a country where history and modernity intertwine in a special harmony. Preparing for the trip was a real adventure for us. Together, we chose routes, studied local traditions and culture, and dreamed of strolling through the narrow streets of Rome and sitting by the sea in the evenings. In every conversation, we could feel our mutual understanding growing and our desire to discover this world together. The trip exceeded all expectations. We strolled through picturesque squares, tried new dishes, and photographed every moment. I felt alive, young, full of energy and joy. Jake was by my side, and together we created memories that will remain in our hearts forever. In addition to traveling, we started doing things that brought us joy and inspiration. I returned to painting, and Jake supported my endeavors, helping me organize small exhibitions and shows. This brought us closer together and made our days rich and meaningful. We learned to appreciate every moment, find beauty in simple things, and share that happiness with each other. Together, we overcame the difficulties we encountered along the way and supported each other in moments of doubt and fatigue. I realized that real life begins when you stop being afraid to be happy. And right now, at this age, I felt truly alive. With each day we spent together, Jake and I understood more and more that our future was not just a continuation of today, but a whole world of possibilities waiting to be discovered. And despite all the trials of the past, we eagerly made plans, dreamed, and sought new horizons for ourselves and our love. One of the important topics of our conversations was the desire to create our own space, a place where every corner would be filled with warmth, comfort, and a reflection of our souls. We talked about our dream home, not a luxurious palace, but a place where we could wake up to birds singing and fall asleep to the whisper of the wind. Jake suggested looking at options for a country house where we could grow our own garden and spend evenings by the fireplace, sharing stories and dreams. The plans were ambitious and inspiring, but at the same time realistic. We understood that it would take time, effort, and patience to make them a reality, but every discussion we had together filled me with confidence that together we could overcome any obstacle. In addition to a home, we dreamed of traveling to places that had long attracted us but remained unattainable for various reasons. Jake talked about his long-held dream of visiting Japan, and I talked about my desire to see the northern lights and walk through a winter forest. We began to plan how we could one day make these dreams come true, bringing them closer to reality step by step. We also focused on each other's personal development, reading books, discussing ideas, supporting each other's aspirations and hobbies. I felt that I had someone by my side who not only loved me, but also inspired me to become a better person, to learn new things, and to grow. With each passing day, I became more and more convinced that age is not a sentence, but the beginning of a new, exciting chapter full of discoveries, love, and true happiness. While I was building my new life, the fate of Tom, my ex-husband, was taking a completely different path. After I left and started to change, he was left alone, and that was his personal choice and challenge. I didn't wish him any harm, but I understood that everyone has their share of responsibility for the decisions they make. At first, Tom seemed confused and devastated. The years we spent together haunted him, but instead of changing or looking for new paths, he immersed himself in loneliness. He was surrounded by old habits and familiar faces, but real warmth and support were slipping away. He tried to fill the void with work, often staying late at the office and immersing himself in his tasks. But behind this facade was emptiness. Without me, his life seemed gray and meaningless. Old friends stopped calling one by one, and new acquaintances were superficial and short-lived. Over time, Tom became more and more withdrawn. His health began to deteriorate. Constant stress and loneliness took their toll on his body. He stopped taking care of himself and became more irritable and withdrawn. Despite all this, I knew that deep down he regretted what he had lost. But regrets don't bring back what's lost, and we all have our own lessons to learn and our own price to pay. Sometimes it seemed to me that he was stuck in the past, in a life that would never return, and I had moved on to a new chapter where true happiness and love awaited me. Trying to find himself, Tom turned to friends who didn't always care about him. Some tried to help, but their support was superficial. His attempts to start new relationships ended quickly. No one could fill the void I left behind. Deep down, he understood that his loss was not only mine. It was a loss of himself, of the part of his life where he was happy and needed. But the fear of change, the fear of letting go of the past, all of this kept him in a place where there was no joy. One day, many months later, Tom tried to contact me. His message was simple, without accusations or complaints, just words of regret and a request for forgiveness. But I was already on my own path, a path of new love and new happiness. I replied respectfully but firmly. Our story was over, and now each of us was building our own life. I wished him peace and strength to change. It was an important step for me, to leave the past behind, not with hatred, but with understanding and gratitude for the lessons it had taught me. Life went on, and with each passing day, I realized more and more that I had made the right choice. Tom remained in his story, and I remained in mine. We both walked different paths, each with its own ups and downs. Sometimes I thought about him, with warmth, without resentment. It was a stage in my life that taught me a lot, and with Jake we strengthened our relationship, made plans, and dreamed together. We already knew that we could overcome any difficulties because our love was sincere and real. We learned to appreciate the moments, to be there for each other, and to support each other. The road was not easy, but it was worth every step. Every evening, when I looked into Jake's eyes, I felt that I had finally found my happiness and let the past remain where it belongs, in the past. On a cool autumn evening, when golden leaves swirled in the air as if dancing a farewell ballet to the passing summer, I met Tom. It happened by chance. We found ourselves on the same street, not far from the cafe where we used to spend our evenings together. My heart beat faster, but this time it wasn't from fear or pain, but from that strange feeling that can be described as both anxiety and hope. He was standing in front of a shop window, his head bowed as if trying to collect his thoughts. When he looked up and saw me, his gaze was full of pain and regret. Tom took a few uncertain steps forward, and I realized he wanted to say something important. "Please, give me a chance to make it right." His voice trembling, as if for the first time in a long time, he was speaking sincerely and without defense. "I was wrong. I was blind to what you meant to me. I wasted time not realizing how much I loved you and how deeply I hurt you. Take me back into your life. Give me a chance to be the man you deserve." His words cut deep into my soul, awakening memories and old pain, but at the same time, they awakened the hope that I had carefully hidden deep inside. I looked at him and saw not only the man who had left, but also the man who now stood before me, a man ready to admit his mistakes and change his life. Contradictions raged inside me, the desire to forgive and the fear of losing myself again. But I knew one thing. Returning to the past would mean forgetting all the lessons I had learned, all the strength I had gathered to become myself. I replied quietly, "I am grateful for your words, but our paths have diverged. I can't go back because I've found a new path, and on this path, I want to be with someone who appreciates me today, not someone who lived in the past." His eyes filled with tears. He nodded, and in that silence, we understood each other. That meeting was further confirmation for me that choosing to be happy is the most important choice in life. Tom left, and I was left with confidence and love for myself, ready to move on, to new heights and new joys. After that meeting with Tom, I walked down the street for a long time, slowly, unhurried, as if each step helped to settle my feelings inside. There was something final about that moment, not malicious, not bitter, just quiet acceptance. I didn't need to prove anything, not to him, not to myself. I had chosen my life, and it was the best path I had ever taken. Jake was waiting for me at home. We agreed to have dinner together, simple, home-cooked, roasted vegetables, herbal tea, and talk about tomorrow. He met me at the door and, seeing the exhaustion in my eyes, didn't ask any questions. He just hugged me tightly, pulled me close, and I felt like I was home. Here. Now, in his arms. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed and thought about my life, which seemed to be divided into before and after. Before was long, decades of marriage, losing myself, expectations, and compromises. After was shorter, but brighter, richer, deeper. I was now living the life I had given myself. The next day, I decided to go to the old house where Tom and I used to live. It had been empty and deserted for a long time. I walked along the familiar steps, touched the railing, remembered how we painted the porch together, how I saw the children off to school from the doorway. Tears welled up in my eyes, but they weren't tears of pain. They were tears of gratitude for everything, for the journey, for the experience, for surviving with my soul and my heart, and finding the strength to start over. I took an old photo out of my bag, Tom and me, young, with our children in our arms. I placed it on the doorstep as if leaving behind a part of the life I had said goodbye to. I no longer needed to carry it inside me. When I got home, I took a notebook and started writing. I wanted to tell my story. Not so that someone would feel sorry for me or admire me, but so that someone, perhaps a woman like me, would feel that there was still a future ahead, that you can love at any age, that choosing yourself is not betrayal, but salvation, that it's never too late to let go of the past and go where the light is. Jake supported me, as always. He reminded me that I had already inspired him, simply by not giving up. And I smiled. I no longer needed to prove my worth. I knew it. I lived it. A week after my trip to the old house, I decided to do something I had never done before. I sat down at the table and wrote a letter. To myself. Not to the person I was now, mature, strong, confident, but to the confused woman who was hurt, scared, and lonely when her husband called her too old, and the world suddenly shrank to a shadow in the mirror. Dearest, I wrote, I was angry with you for so long for your weakness. But now, looking back, I realize how incredibly brave you were. You stood your ground. You didn't give up. You suffered, but you got back up. You didn't seek revenge. You didn't break down. You didn't become bitter. And for that, I love you. I wrote and cried. These were tears of purification, not pain. I forgave myself for the years spent pleasing others, living in fear and remaining silent. And I gave thanks that, despite everything, I had preserved my soul, my humanity, and my ability to love. I folded the letter neatly and put it in a box. Let it remain as a reminder of who I was and who I could become. And most importantly, as proof that every woman can choose herself, even when it seems that all is lost. Later that day, I sat by the window with a cup of tea, and Jake came up behind me, put his hands on my shoulders, and said quietly, "You look especially beautiful today." I smiled. It was true, not because I had lost weight or changed my appearance, but because I was finally wearing a happy face, real happiness, not forced, not temporary, but hard-won and rebuilt brick by brick. The morning was surprisingly sunny. Fresh glass sparkled in the window, daisies bloomed on the windowsill, and the kitchen smelled of cinnamon and baked apples. I was standing at the stove when I heard Jake come in and put a small white envelope on the table. He didn't say anything, just nodded in its direction and sat down to drink his coffee. My name was neatly written on the envelope. The handwriting was recognizable. It was my ex-husband's wife. We weren't close, but we kept in touch politely. I opened the letter. Inside was a wedding invitation. Their daughter, my former daughter-in-law, was getting married and wanted me to be there. I reread the lines, not believing it. There was no hint of formality. On the contrary, it was warm. At the end of the letter was written, "You have always been an example to me of how a woman can maintain her dignity. I would be happy if you would share this day with us." I was struck by a feeling of completeness. I had been moving forward for so long that I had hardly looked back. And suddenly someone from my past life reached out to me, not to take me back, but to acknowledge that I had survived, that I was still human, that I deserved respect. I showed the letter to Jake. He read it silently, then took my hand and said, "You have no idea how many people you've inspired." And at that moment, I suddenly realized life is an amazing thing. It's not always fair, it's not always gentle. But if you hold on, if you choose yourself, if you keep going, it will reward you one day. Not always in the way you expected, but honestly, truly. We went to the wedding together. I put on my favorite light-colored dress, wove fresh flowers into my hair, and when I appeared in the hall, I felt all eyes on me, not as a guest, but as a woman who had gone through fire and remained light. After the wedding, Jake and I returned home late at night. The road was quiet. We hardly spoke. We just held hands. Words weren't necessary. On that night, everything was clear without them. I sat in a chair by the window, already in my pajamas, leafing through an old album. There were photos of me and Tom, young, with children on the beach, at the cottage, on an old sofa with a blanket. Photos that used to cause pain now evoked a calm, steady warmth. Not because I wanted to bring back that time, no, but because I had finally accepted it. Without anger, without shame, without regret. Life is not a perfectly edited film, but a series of actions, mistakes, and choices. Once upon a time, I clung to the past, afraid that without it, I would have nothing left. But today, I knew that I had everything. And it was precisely because I had once lost everything that I had learned to appreciate it. The next morning, I wrote a letter to Tom, not with reproaches, not with requests, just with gratitude for the children, for the years, for the lessons, and for the fact that his betrayal pushed me towards a life that I would never have dared to build for myself. At the end, I wrote, "I forgive you, and I let you go. I wish you peace." I didn't send the letter. I folded it up and put it away in a drawer. It wasn't for him. It was for me, to put the final, truly final period on things. Then I got up, made some coffee, put on a cardigan, and went out into the garden. Jake was waiting for me there, twirling a ring in his hands. He smiled and said, "You know, I already consider us a family. But I want you to wear this ring someday. Not for appearances, but to mark the beginning of a new chapter." I didn't say a word. I just took the ring, kissed his hand, and felt one thing ending and something much bigger beginning. A few more months passed. Our house with Jake became a place I wanted to come back to. There were no gold chandeliers or marble floors, but every corner breathed peace. The kitchen always smelled of baking or fresh herbs, and in the bedroom there was an old chest of drawers where I had arranged photos. Children, grandchildren, Jake and me by the ocean, daisies in my hair, and even one black and white photo from my past life. As a reminder, I had lived, I had made mistakes, I was starting over. Sometimes the children came to visit on weekends, sometimes they didn't, and that was okay too. I no longer felt resentment or emptiness. Inside me there was a fullness, warm and steady, like a cup of hot cocoa on a chilly evening. One evening, Jake and I went out onto the terrace. The sky was clear above us, and in the distance, beyond the field, we could hear crickets chirping. I leaned against his shoulder, and he whispered, "You know, if you hadn't met me, I would still want you to be happy, because you're one of those women who make the world a better place just by being alive." I squeezed his hand. There were no tears inside me. There was no sadness, only peace, and a feeling that finally all the pieces of my life had fallen into place. I was no longer afraid of getting older. I wasn't afraid of change. I wasn't afraid of loneliness, because I knew I wasn't broken. I was a survivor. I am free, and I am happy again. And most importantly, I am finally home, within myself, in this life, in this present moment. Looking back, I see how far I have come, from pain and betrayal to love and self-respect. My story is one of strength, change, and choosing to be happy no matter what. I have learned to let go, forgive, and accept myself. I have realized that age is not a barrier, but a new beginning. That love comes when you are ready to accept it. That true beauty is in the soul, and happiness is in the ability to appreciate every moment. My husband said I was too old. I proved him wrong. I have become stronger, more beautiful, and happier than ever before. And my new journey is just beginning.